morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Better Information Management for Construction SMEs. I would now like to introduce Chris Mills, Consultant, and Stuart Bells, Director at Group BC, and I'll hand over to Stuart now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, and good morning all. Just before we get started, I just wanted to give a very brief introduction to Group BC. So for the past 20 years, we've been helping organisations that operate in and around the built environment be more joined up and organised in the way that they run their business, but notably their projects, both internally and collaboratively with their clients and supply chain partners. We work right across the industry, so there's a variety of different sectors that you can see there, and we work with a number of different organisations, from contractors through to consultants and asset owning clients as well. And I think it's that breadth of client reach that we've got that gives us quite a unique perspective on some of the challenges that are beset by industry, and why we've been well positioned to help support some of those challenges. I guess my job at the start of today, before I hand over to Chris, is to give a little bit of a context, and I've just called this a health check report on digital transformation. We've had a couple of years of BIM wash, and BIM, it seems, in modern rhetoric, has been superseded by a new phrase, digital transformation, a journey toward the path of enlightenment. And I think if you were to, just over a couple of years ago, if you were stood in April 2016, looking out into the future with one wave of the magical BIM wand, you may have thought that your organisation and your supply chain and clients that you're delivering projects to would all be seamlessly joined up, and would all be digitally working and speaking the same language. And I think we've certainly made some great strides, and I've called upon one of the more well-read reports here, MBS's National BIM Report, who reported that over 60% of organisations now use BIM, whatever BIM means. We know it's not technology; it's a combination of technology, people and process. But it's great to see that 95% of organisations surveyed expect to be working towards those BIM methodologies, utilising BIM technologies and tools within the next 3 years. But buyer beware, caveat emptor. Only 45% of project teams say that they use a model from inception to completion of a project, and we know ourselves that there are certain stratas or sectors that things like IFC or the variety of different tools in use mean that adoption of BIM hasn't been as mature, and perhaps it's because clients haven't driven that approach. And to that end, I turn to another survey here. So this Construction Manager BIM Plus survey from March last year gives an indication from a client perspective, just highlighted in green against each of those three bullets. So central government departments, 38%. Are making BIM Level 2 mandatory. In other publicly funded clients, so local authorities and government agencies, only 17%, whereas in the private sector it was sat at a more measly 11% demanding Level 2 BIM. But what we're certainly seeing is a trend towards people wanting to be more organised, not only in their own organisation, but actually how they deliver project information up and down the chain, so back to their supply chain and also forward through to their clients. And the same survey pulled up it pulled up the 8 pillars of BIM, and it shows that all of those higher spike bars around the 50% mark are where, whether it's government soft landings through to COBE or PAS 1192-5 cybersecurity protocols, the significant number of organisations have never used them, and in fact, in terms of those are already embedded, you can see that we're probably at best hovering just below the 20% mark. So from our collective perspective, I think we all recognise we've got some way to go. And I take heart from this paper, so the future of real estate, by the University of Oxford, a research piece looking at probably one of traditionally what might have been viewed by one of the more staid sectors in terms of commercial real estate, chartered surveying that area, but there's been this real resurgence in PropTech, property technology. What we're seeing there, the use of sensors, big data, predictive analytics, there's a real resurgence to actually take a real handle of how our buildings are being operated and used, and to actually harvest and harness that information at source in order that we can make better decisions. So it's great that we can see in different areas of the industry that people are making some big strides and advances. But there are other things in more recent times that have kind of hit the news headlines and really drive us to take action. And I would possibly challenge, going back last year, the top item on the boardroom agenda around the time of Grenfell may have been about how strong do we feel about the audit trail and provenance of information that we produce on the projects that we deliver. And the journalist here for the CM briefing talks about 80 terabytes of data just in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea Council that had to be mined to try and find some specification information about the cladding of that particular project. We're also, as an industry, heavily regulated. So whether that compliance is relating to health and safety, the efficacy of building materials and whether materials have been tested, and we've got a register and list of those, or even through to the legality of construction contracts, the evidence and the process of attaining, achieving and retaining those compliance are often underpinned, or processes are underpinned and supported by technology. So yet another driver there. And as hit the headlines, if we go back a couple of years to Monsec Fonseca and 11 terabytes of data leaked, and ministers of governments worldwide seem to be having lots of extracurricular activity in financial affairs, through to some more recent security breaches that are very well documented. It's now imperative to us that we need to take better controls, and actually even for our clients' information, whether that be design detail or project or asset information, we're their custodians of data. And for those of you who I'm sure are very well read on GDPR, the focus on that is heightened even more still. So we're on this journey, and to take a short-term horizon, if I sat here as the UK BIM Alliance, I've got a target by 2020 of getting the whole industry to a state of 70% adoption on BIM, and notably BIM level 2 for those projects where it's relevant. But for everyone else, it's about a progressive transition, looking at how we can positively impact and change our business models to benefit from lean operation, process change, underpinned by technology, in order that we can, certainly in construction, retain our position of competitiveness and hopefully improve some of the single-digit margins that we operate to. Start to think about how we can operate differentiated services to our clients, and it's people that will determine the success of that, not technology. We probably all will have been around projects in our lives where technology implementations have failed because the scope has been ill-defined. We haven't had board sponsorship. We haven't had a clear mandate or project scope that clearly articulates the enterprise need, but right down to the "what's in it for me" question to the individual. And I thought it was quite an interesting article here from the Economist. Without the skills to stay useful as innovations arrive, workers suffer, and if enough of them fall behind, society starts to fall apart. And we've seen that investment, for instance, from the banks when they made that transition from high street to online banking, and some of the extra push, love and support they've given to maybe a demographic who are a little bit older in society to make sure that they don't get left behind. It's incumbent for us in our own organisations that those people that we know are either resistant to change or are IT laggards, that we give them our support, and we actually make sure that we're harvesting the vital knowledge that they've got in perhaps the running of projects, and make sure that that knowledge makes its way onto our projects. So the connected business today moves at a startling pace, and technology has driven some of that. And if we were to look back over the last decade, even further, if we went back to the late 90s, the advent of the World Wide Web, and perhaps over the last decade, that tipping point where email became the dominant mode of transport for communication, but also for things like file attachments and some of the challenges that delivered to us. No longer were we given the luxury of 2 or 3 days to consider the client request for a design change. There's an immediacy that sits there with email, and as an organisation of 100, 1,000, 10,000 people, that's 100, 1,000, or 10,000 potential conduits to your business that information can pour in and out of. And equally, that formal control that historically you may have had around things like requests for information, or the transmission or distribution of latest as-builts, unless you've got rigorous controls, can just escape and be released out to the wider project masses via email. And you're reliant on individuals on those project teams making sure they file. So the speed of technology on the whole is good, but we have to be cautious and make sure that we're putting the right control points in place. We still see a lot of data. The industry has been going through this steady transition of paper to files, and now it's files to data. And paper slows us down. However, there is something about the tactile nature in certain processes that we still like. So we have to be reasonable and think about how we can accommodate some of these paper workflows into our business processes. Apologies for this startling image, but we also have to think about how well equipped we are in terms of systems to cope with the volumes and size of files that are now hitting our servers. The extra rigor of security we're now expected to put around our business, and then very tightly around maybe perhaps specific projects that have got secure and sensitive data needs around them. And is it appropriate that we're now using perhaps one of our junior engineers as the IT rep in our business to help manage all of that and to take that burden? And we give it as a value add responsibility to our finance director who's historically owned IT. Or perhaps we ought to be looking at different ways of outsourcing the service, but making sure we're insourcing the data and keeping control of the information that we need ourselves to operate. We've then got this different drive as well. I think when iPads landed in our Christmas boxes 5 years ago, or certainly those of our board directors, they came in the first Monday after Christmas with a complete thirst and desire for management information, such as the ease and the ease of access. And there was an expectation that this anytime, everywhere working should be just part of business as usual. And so this forever connected world from when we wake up to when we go to sleep, or if we're a business that might have even an overseas design operation, so that you've got this 24/7 throughput, we've got to make sure that wherever we are, we can connect our people in our business to the information they need to take better business decisions on their project. Yet still, we still see very unique approaches to file management. And apologies if this is representative of any of your desktops today. I'm sure it makes perfect sense. But actually, people that file in this way, whether it's on their personal desktops or the myriad of network shares on their P for project drive, as soon as you open control for someone at a project level to create a folder, anarchy reigns, and it might make perfect sense for them at the time to where things are filed, but to everyone else on that project that are trying to find information, they're penalised, and they end up spending an inordinate amount of time, wasted time, just searching for stuff they know should be there, and perhaps sometimes Windows as a tool for searching doesn't give us the best capability. But don't worry, we're an industry that's grown up around Excel, email and Dropbox, and that's got us out of jail on our projects at a very personal level, because I'm charged with just getting this project done, in lieu of the corporate systems that have been mandated that perhaps don't give me the level of operational control I need, because nobody's ever engaged me appropriately. I'll just revert to these because it allows me to get the job done. But perhaps it exposes us to a bit of business risk. I talked earlier about compliance, and for anyone who's goes through ISO audits, and you've got an internal auditor. I'm sure my wife's a teacher. She has that concern, as do the whole school, when the Ofsted inspectors are due to arrive the next day, about staying up very late, straightening out the files and making sure they've got everything in place. And we've seen lots of evidence over the past 20 years of internal audit of that happening. But for good reason, and we want to make sure that technology can help support compliance and make sure that compliance is actually a byproduct of just everyday working in a rigorous yet intuitive system. We're a litigious industry. I heard recently of claims going in on a project that hadn't even started, which is an interesting diversion of where the industry is heading. But this quote made me smile from Stella Rington. The Thames House refurbishment was fraught with difficulties. It was clear that dealing with the building industry was just as tricky as dealing with the KGB. I'm sure that's not the case at all, but it just really highlights this point of communication. I'm sure on this project, it's how clearly did the MI5 articulate their requirements for the project, and how open was that communication, and how apt that we talk about the MI5 and cyber attack. So there's regrettably, cyber attack isn't just the realm, or businesses, major corporates aren't the only ones open to attack now. I read a stat recently that 28% of what were deemed SME businesses were open to ransomware attacks in the past 12 months. So these Trojan viruses that come in and lock up your network shares, demanding Bitcoin payment before they'll release the keys to let you to provide you access to your data. So there's lots of things now that we regrettably need to prepare ourselves against. And not least in this instance, a policy where somebody didn't lock down pen drives or external hard drives, because it seems that here in China, a whole Zaha Hadid project was pirated. And in one of these other super cities in China that nobody had ever heard of, this remarkably similar project that looked like a Zaha Hadid design got out of the ground before the original project was commissioned. So I talked about MI5 there, and articulation of requirements as we start to mature our information management understanding, and as we look towards clients to give as much tighter briefs, the employee information requirement, what exactly are you trying to achieve? It's important that we capture that requirement ourselves as a business, and then if we're reliant on a construction supply chain to work with us, that we're very clear in our communication back to them as well. So let's call apples apples and be very specific about what we want in that regard. Because ultimately, in delivering the physical asset, we also now have to deliver its digital twin and a data set that needs to be verified. And perhaps if you're a main contractor, a lot of the core information will be provided and verified by yourselves from your subcontract supply chain. So it's making sure we've got the processes that support that. And we're starting to be challenged and start to see an emergence around the industry of people wanting to understand, where are my projects, where are my assets, where are my supply chain based, in order that we can perhaps use things like mapping interfaces to pull together a different context and perspective on the world. So if I'm going out to visit a project in Newcastle, at a remediation level, have we done any other projects either en route or in that vicinity? How can I show my users internally through something that's very intuitive, like a mapping interface, where that information sits? But there are lots and lots of other business drivers that people are looking toward when they're thinking about their own personal digital transformation journey, whether it's about improving profitability, whether it's about mitigating risk, whether it's about just empowering a an age of graduates that are coming into the business to work smarter because it's what they expect, and we want to delight them and retain them and make sure that we're continuing to upskill them with the knowledge, but give them the tools that they demand and deserve. There's quite a number of things that we're looking at. And today, what we'll focus on, if we look at the totality of information, either in our business, but specifically on a project, the iceberg's quite a good analogy to look at what are the information deliverables. Now, those are the contractual things that you get paid against, but equally that you're held accountable by. So, how robust are your processes for ensuring that those information deliverables are published appropriately? And how well enabled and equipped are you to support all of that work in progress, both internally, but also from your supply chain? Because it's that interface, that bridge between your internal work in progress and that collaborative environment, the Switzerland of the project environment, that neutral space that perhaps you might be provisioning to enable your project to run more smoothly. How well does that all operate and work? Just before I hand over to Chris, to characterise typically what we see and what we've seen over 20 years is people accessing information through a variety of different systems, a variety of different browsers, a hell of a lot of email still, the deluge of email that's gumming up our personal productivity, but also exposing us organisationally to risk, because those emails and the different messaging approaches now are constantly a nagging reminder to us about how inept or how much work we've got to do on any given day. Those emails not only carrying the instruction, but also carrying the attachment, and the multiple copies of those attachments that sit in our inboxes that cause our email servers to fall over. Those emails that are extracted then and pushed out onto yellow folders on our P for project drives, and the anarchy and chaos of those network shares as folder after folder are created both on our personal desktops, our network shares, perhaps then even in FTP drives as well. The variety of different applications and different file types we're expected to manage and view. How do we contain those? Certain proprietary or departmental applications, we've got the different challenge of individual gatekeepers who sit across those applications. And if we can't get the information we want, we end up using Excel as an intermediary that acts as the reporting interface, that really delivers the operational control at a project level that we demand. But as soon as we've separated information from perhaps our finance system to Excel, it's become disconnected, it's latent, it's out of date, and potentially it's prone to error. And so we have to think of a way of how do we replace or bind some of the Excel register and listing capabilities and bring that back under our control. And how do we support better and more robust auditing of how we're sharing information, these very large files, and the data within these very large files up and down the chain? So typically that's a landscape we see. I will hand over to my colleague Chris, and what we want to do is I guess spend the next 20-25 minutes just giving you a focus on our response to at Group BC to some of those challenges that I've just articulated. Chris.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stuart, and good morning, everybody. As Stuart said, I'm just going to spend about 20-25 minutes really just taking on a bit of a journey, really, just talking around some of our experiences and some of the practical examples that we come across, just in terms of how SMEs can start to tackle this concept of better information management. I think it's always a bit daunting at the start of these types of journeys where we're looking to try and embrace new technologies and new processes. But there are absolutely things that we can do from a technology perspective that can smooth that path. So I think it's probably worth reminding ourselves just in terms of the common data environment and what it is and what it stands for. And again, the quote which I tend to refer back to is the one from the B1M, which really simply puts it as an online place for collecting, managing, and sharing information. So I think in terms of kind of breaking down those barriers and breaking through some of that bin wash within the industry, keeping things as simple as humanly possible is absolutely something which we'd look to encourage. And again, it's something which we're very much close to our hearts when we're thinking about how we can take our customers on that journey into the world of better information management. So just in terms of kind of where we are as an industry, and whilst we've kind of referenced SMEs here, I don't think this is necessarily reflective on specifically the SME sector of the market. I think if we look at the industry more broadly, as Stuart's kind of alluded to already, we're coming from a world where there's lots of disjointed systems, everyone's speaking different languages, we might be using emails and attachments, Dropbox, yellow folders, these sorts of things, and it can become a little bit chaotic in terms of trying to break through and get some clarity around what the scope is and what we're expected to deliver. I think ultimately what we're trying to introduce is a bit more structure and a bit more clarity and some organisation around not only how we're communicating with our peers on projects, but equally how we're communicating internally across different departments as well. So I think that's one of the things which we put a lot of emphasis on when we're talking to our SME customers, and that's around, yes, BC is absolutely that common data environment which is going to help you on that BIM journey to BIM level 2 and hopefully beyond in a few years' time. But equally, we put an equal amount of importance on how you're managing all your information internally as well. So that's something which we'll certainly let's cover as we go through this morning's presentation. But just in terms of a slide which PCSG put together, I think it's quite pertinent just to kind of remind ourselves of the reality of the market and this kind of proliferation of systems that we've got. And I think in terms of where we're looking to move the industry is all around this concept of connected data. And again, I think there's probably a little bit of a misconception within the industry at the moment around SMEs having thinking that it's okay to piggyback on top of the main contractor's common data environment or the client's common data environment. And whilst that is an approach which is valid, it's probably the cheapest and the path of least resistance. It does expose you to a lot of risks. So I think in recent months and weeks, we've seen examples where, from an SME perspective, you might be cut off from the main contractors or the client's common data environment, and all of a sudden you're left pretty exposed and you've lost an awful lot of useful information. So I think there's absolutely a shift going on within the market, and specifically within the SME space, where they're starting to recognise the importance of owning their own information and having the systems in place to support that going forwards. Again, just a couple of quick paragraphs from PCSG, and I think the one which I'd tend to focus on is the second paragraph there, which is really starting to put the onus on us as an industry, and particularly within the SME sector, around owning that information management strategy and looking to wean ourselves off the likes of emails and Dropbox and FTP sites and into the world of standardized ways of working. Absolutely appreciate it. It can be a difficult task to try and bring those kind of the laggards along with us, kicking or screaming as much as they do. But in terms of from a technology perspective, there's absolutely things that we can do to smooth that path when it comes to things like naming your files correctly in line with sort of the suite of 1192 standards, and starting to tag your information with relevant pieces of metadata as well. So just to explain the term metadata again, it's some people understand it, some people don't, but effectively it's really just a simple term for tagging documents or files with bits of information. So the analogy which I always tend to refer back to is one of Auto Trader. So again, if I was going back to my teen years and looking for a whizzy Ford Fiesta, then I'd go onto the Auto Trader website and look for a Ford Fiesta, a 1.2 in red with alloy wheels. And all those little bits of information are just metadata tags which are helping me to search for the right kind of things going forward. So applying that to document management systems and the world of common data environments, it's just about adopting those disciplines and those ways of working to help not only our colleagues but our extended project teams to find information in a year or 3 years or 5 years time. I think it's always important to kind of reflect on where we are at the moment and where we're looking to get to. And I think it's always a temptation when we start on these sorts of journeys to to kind of crank up the volume to BIM level 3 and beyond, and get quite excited about some of the technologies which are out there in the industry. So we attend lots of events where you start to see things like robotics and automation, VR, AR, all of these really exciting technologies. But I think when we get back to the office, I think when we come back down to earth with a little bit of a bump, I think that the real kind of basics and building blocks of BIM is around this information management and getting our house in order. So we'd always encourage BIM level 1 as the starting point, but equally we'll look to take you on that path going forward, so you can turn up the volume to BIM level 2. Of course, it wouldn't be a BIM presentation without the infamous wedge in there. But again, just very, very briefly, it is absolutely a journey which we're all going on as an industry. And again, I think it's important to recognise that yes, absolutely, there are SMEs out there who are absolutely pushing the boundaries of level 2 BIM. But equally, I think if we look at it more broadly, I think most of the market are right at the start of that journey and looking to try and adopt some of the level 0 and level 1 principles of BIM. In terms of, from our perspective, so as I kind of alluded to earlier, BC isn't just for BIM projects. Yes, we absolutely provide that common data environment and support a lot of our customers on delivering BIM projects. But equally, and again, if I reflect back on some of the work that we're doing with our SME customers, it's really about utilising BC's breadth and depth of capability to improve some of those internal collaboration challenges as well. So simple things like visual guides on a web page around sort of intranet style pages starts to get users engaged and starts to get them up and running with some of the kind of the basic concepts of using these types of technologies. Just a quick kind of case study, and just kind of reflecting back on some of the work that we've done within sort of the SME market, and Mackley are probably a good example of where the industry's at, where back in 2015, they were starting to get pressures from some of their clients, the likes of the Environment Agency, who were wanting their supply chain to become BIM level 2 compliant. But not only that, I think they had an internal kind of business drive to improve their departmental collaboration and how they're storing and sharing information across the business as well. So again, they've been on a journey with BC to not only set up their BIM level 2 projects, but also look to introduce some more kind of quality standards around how they're managing information internally as well. Just a quick slide on some of the immediate benefits which Mackley kind of produce, which is really pleasing to see. And I think one of the key ones is one right at the top there, where all of a sudden you're coming from a world of disjointed systems to a world where BC effectively becomes your one-stop shop for information. So whether it's kind of reference information, policies, procedures, internal documents, you don't have to log into multiple systems. It's all kept and held within a single system, and that can kind of translate into your project environment as well. So without further ado, I'm going to crack on with a quick demonstration of BC, and this is really just to take you through some practical examples of how you can start to think about utilising this type of technology to start taking you on that journey to better information management. So this is just one of our demonstration systems. As Stuart alluded to, security is absolutely at the forefront of people's minds. So username and password is the kind of standard method of logging into the system. And we're fortunate enough to work with some quite high-profile clients here at Group BC, and on that basis, we do have additional options around layers of security. So you can add things like two-factor authentication. We can introduce things like single sign-on to help adoption. But ultimately, this is all about sort of logging into a collaborative area. And generally speaking, we start the system off quite open and quite collaborative, and you can lock it down as and when you see appropriate. But to give you a very quick overview of the user interface. So this is kind of a typical example of what we would see when we log in on a Monday morning. We've got some buttons on the left-hand side, which will take us into various areas of the system. We've got some search capability down at the bottom left. You've got some search, kind of a Google-style search on the top bar, which is never present. And something which I use on a fairly regular basis is the document content searching as well. So I think when we're working in a collaborative environment, you might not necessarily know the file name of what you're looking for, but you have a general idea of the document content. So it's little things and subtleties like that which will start to get users bought into using the system. Just very quickly, you've also got your task dashboards. So again, what we're trying to avoid is BC or any of these systems becoming a dumping ground for files. So we always encourage the use of the workflow element within BC. So if you need documents or drawings reviewed, signed off, approved, whatever it might be, then you can track that workflow and those transactions through the system, through your inbox and your outbox as well. You've also got quick access to your recent spaces or recent projects and your recent documents. So the idea being here that anything which you need on a regular basis is only 1 or 2 clicks away. So again, that's always a bit of a challenge that we pose to our colleagues in development. Users can become or are, including myself, pretty impatient with these sorts of things. If you can't find what you're looking for pretty quickly, then you can start to get a little bit frustrated. So we put a lot of effort in terms of kind of the simplicity aspect of BC, but equally structuring your information in a way which is going to help other people find things. So I'm just going to start off. If I wanted to search for a project, there's a number of ways of going about it, and just coming back to one of the elements which Stuart talked about in terms of unlocking the power of GIS and these kind of geo capabilities, then all of a sudden I can start to navigate my way through the system using some pins on a map, which will direct me into either projects or assets which I might be working on a regular basis. So if I was working on one in Reading, for example, I can simply click on the pin on the map, and it will take me into a particular area of that system. So it's just a slightly different way of engaging users who might be more comfortable with utilizing a map interface as opposed to going through a series of searches. Alternatively, I can search for my projects down in the left-hand corner. And again, if we were working on a refurbishment project, for example, you can start to cut and slice that information and find what you're looking for very, very quickly within the system. So if I do a quick search for some refurbishment projects, and I'm going to dive into the Reading Bridge House refurbishment project here. And again, this is just a really sort of typical example of what a project summary page looks like. So again, you've got some project information. So whilst this is kind of name, description, project types, etc., you could have project owners, project managers, their contact details. So again, it's all about sort of bringing forward the salient information to the users literally as soon as they come into the project area. Now down at the bottom, we've got what will probably look fairly familiar to a lot of people online, which is a fairly typical example of a folder structure. Now, I think in a fairly informal world of collaboration, folder structures do have their place. But in a second, I'll show you a bit more of a formal BIM Level 2 type environment where we strip away those folder structures and limit the number of areas which we're uploading into. So, but coming back to what most people will be familiar with, and again, this might be a part of the journey to getting people engaged within these sorts of systems, because everyone's fairly comfortable with folders, they understand how they work, but equally we need to make them aware of the pitfalls going forward. So if I just dive into the photos folder, for example, just to give you a quick idea in terms of kind of how the system navigates. So we've got some basic information. We've got a list of files here, and we've got some photos. So if I just click on one of those, brings up a nice little thumbnail, so I can see the image of the photo. I've also got a couple of links down here as well. So coming back to getting users bought into these sorts of systems, people might have used Dropbox before, for example. And again, this very informal way of collaboration is something which is available within BC, and on certain types of projects that it could have its place. So if I just want to very quickly send one of my colleagues a link to this particular file, I've got a little icon which just fires up an email, and it effectively allows me to fire off an email to that particular user going forwards. I'll just close that down. Equally, if I come back up the level, back into sort of the project area, what you can also look to do, or what is fairly typical in these types of environments, is loading project information. So again, this is a fairly typical example of kind of a set of Word documents which might be sitting within a particular project. Now we can see here that we've got some standard documents. Now, if I wanted to upload some documents into this particular area, it's a very, very simple method of dragging and dropping from BC, or from my laptop, should I say, onto BC. Now I could do this en masse if I wanted to, but in this example, I'm just going to drop the project brief document into BC. Now I recognise that from a version control perspective, I've already got a document sitting within this folder, so it's alerting me to that fact. And I'm just going to say, okay, I want to revise and replace it. will just upload on this occasion. So again, all of a sudden I've got my updated document off my laptop and into BC within a couple of seconds. So again, it's something which has been within the software for a number of years, and again, just sort of gets people bought into using these types of technologies. Just very quickly, if I drop this down, just from kind of mentioning the version control aspect of it, I've got a number of options here, and I can view the version information against these particular documents. And what BC does, it will split it into different bandings. And again, this is kind of getting us into the world of the audit trail. And so again, anything which you do within BC gets captured against your username and password. So again, a little bit Big Brother styley. If I cut and paste a document, if I delete it, that will get logged against my username. So again, bringing that back into sort of the world of project delivery, I'm sure we're all familiar that unfortunately disputes are fairly commonplace within the industry. But I think if you can refer back to a transparent, auditable system where you can very clearly articulate who's done what and when, then again, all of those sort of discussions and awkward conversations will start to fade away. Okay. So Stuart mentioned the challenges that we all have got around emails and managing those, and I think I think it'd be arrogant of us to expect BC to completely replace the use of email. I think email's always going to be there, but it's all about how we can sort of integrate those types of technologies and make people's lives a little bit easier in terms of managing that daily deluge that we all get. So through Outlook add-ins and Office add-ins, we can get emails and attachments and other kind of documents into BC directly from within those applications. And again, we've just got a couple of quick examples of some email files sitting within this correspondence folder here. I think the last area which we'll have a quick look into, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, is around kind of drawing management. So we've got a detailed design folder here, which is containing some DWGs and some PDF drawings. And again, if I'm working in the world of kind of collaboration, and again, what we sort of generally tend to encourage is the use of workflow within Business Collaborator, so you can keep that kind of record of transactions around who's approved the document, when it was approved, and any kind of commentary which sits around that as well. So you probably noticed I've got a little issued icon next to this particular drawing here. And again, if I can click on that, I can all of a sudden start to drill into that history, that workflow, that life cycle that this particular drawing has gone through. So again, I can see it's gone through an RFI transaction. I can also see it's gone through a team sharing transmitter. I can see the status of those is both complete. So I think, again, I think if we come back into the world of that kind of informal collaboration, for example, if I close that down, I think one of the dangers that we can always get into is around kind of version control and having absolute clarity around whether you work into a latest version or not. So if I was sent this link, for example, if I just click on that, what BC will do, it will alert me to the fact that I'm about to access an outdated version of that particular document. So again, I think one of the common challenges that we come across in all kind of sectors of construction is dangers and confusion around whether I'm working to the latest version of a document or not. And again, little subtleties like this, which BC brings to the fore, just introduces a bit more clarity around what you're accessing and why. So I'm just going to quickly dive into one of our BIM Level 2 projects, just to give you a bit of an idea in terms of how that kind of structure differentiates itself. And again, what we're trying to move away from in the world of BIM, or what we're trying to move towards, should I say, is this standardization and a common way of working using some common terminologies, and which is all hopefully we're getting more familiar with. So I think from my perspective, as I kind of alluded to, what we're looking to try and do is strip away those multiple levels of deeply nested folder structures. Because if I've got a document which relates to finance and health and safety, do I upload it into finance folder, or do I upload it into health and safety, or do I duplicate it and put it into both? And we can very quickly become unstuck in those types of situations. So what we tend to do in this type of environment, and again, I don't want to steal too much of my colleagues' thunder on our next webinar series, but this is our kind of standard out-of-the-box BIM Level 2 configuration, which all of our clients are starting to utilize. So anyone starting to work on these kind of BIM type projects will have a general idea in terms of this kind of WIP, shared, publish, archive status. But again, we've got some reports which are supported within that. And again, if we come into sort of the working documentation area, which is our single upload location, we can all of a sudden start to see a bit more detail around how these documents have been uploaded and how they've been processed onto the system as well. So we've got some information around sort of suitability, approval statuses, originating companies, etc. And these are all kind of standard 1192 tags that we're working within. So just in terms of kind of working in this type of environment, so again, we've got a couple of DWGs here. Now again, if I was kind of working in a workflow type environment, then I might have been sent these for a particular purpose. Someone might be asking me to review or approve them. But equally, I can view these DWGs without the fact that I've got, I don't have thousands of pounds worth of AutoCAD on my laptop here, but through BC's integrated viewing technology, not only can I view them, but I can also compare these two drawings as well. So I think this is really handy tool just in terms of kind of streamlining that workflow process. Where again, I think historically we're coming from a world of getting sent these documents or drawings either through post or on a CD or emailed as an attachment. We're then looking to print them out, scribble on top of them, and then send them back on their merry way. But I think in terms of those kind of design review processes or document approval processes, all of a sudden these types of workflows can take place within a few minutes or significantly quicker than we have done historically as well. So if I was just to very quickly overlay the differences, I can see that some changes have happened between version 1 of that drawing and version 2. I can very quickly sort of drill down and provide some commentary and some markups and some red lines around this type of workflow as well. So again, a subtle tool within sort of BC's capability, but it just helps to drive those efficiencies in terms of how we're delivering projects and how we're getting to speedy resolutions around these types of workflows and capabilities as well. I'm just going to finish off with a quick sneak preview, really, just in terms of some of our BIM viewing capabilities. And again, I'm conscious I don't want to step on my colleagues' toes too much, but I think when we're starting to move into the world of BIM, and particularly BIM level 2, then the support that we have is around this IFC standard. And again, it's something which is certainly user-friendly within the system, because again, we've kind of recognized that this is all about collaboration. This is opening up information and data to the whole supply chain. And again, it's a very simple way of visualizing that data through the online viewer. So again, if I select those 3 model files, so those 3 have been produced, one by the architect, one by the MEP, and one by the structural team. So I could view those in isolation if I wanted to, but in fact, what I want to do is view that entire entity and see the assets through the three sort of federated designs. So again, we made a conscious decision to make our viewing tool, dead simple. Again, we're not trying to kind of replace the likes of Revit or Navisworks, and again, I should probably caveat this with the fact that this isn't just a viewing technology. We are able to interact and associate information to this particular model. So again, we're starting to get into the realms of kind of digital O&M here, where we're starting to enrich the model with information and data. So if I just selected that window, I might say, okay, I want to find all other windows which are located on level 2 of the building. So very quickly do a find and select, and we'll go off and find the remaining windows. And what we're then able to do is start to associate or tag those objects with information which is held within our CD, for example. So if I do a quick search for window, you can start to get the idea of the benefits that you can start to enjoy when you're starting to work in this type of environment, where all of a sudden all of that objects and sort of design authoring data is readily available to us, but we can start to supplement that information, those objects, with documentation and with information which is held within our CDE. So when it comes to things like handover, we've got a fully populated IFC model with all the associated data, all the associated documents, and our client should be very happy. Okay, I'm probably going to finish there, and I will hand back to Stuart.
Thank you, Chris. I'll just pop us back into PowerPoint mode. Just by way of wrap up, we've gone on a journey where we stood back in April 2016, looking at the path to enlightenment of the government mandate on BIM and the magic wand, and then we've talked about the reality of where a lot of the industry and our organisations are, or even pockets or project teams within an overall enterprise might be. And we've talked about some of the challenges and how to unlock those. It's quite an interesting paper from KPMG, architect, engineering, construction companies and project owners who invest in disruptive technologies should enjoy a step change in performance. So again, not in isolation, but if we review our process, if we educate our people, train, upskill, and bring them on the journey, if we ensure that projects and system initiatives have strong sponsorship, a clear mandate, then undoubtedly there are some pull-through benefits that can be achieved. And just picking on a couple of clients, having a system that supports best practice is really underpinning the success and profitability of projects. Just to paraphrase Bill at Costain, one of our clients, and just picking up on the point about partnering with an organisation. It's really important that when you're implementing a system, that the technology vendor that you engage actually talks your language, is accessible, not only from those early stages of discovery when you're trying to identify the key requirements, and you might work with a vendor at that point to look at the movement and direction of travel and how they might be able to support you, but all the way through to mobilisation training and then ongoing support and account management. Just in terms of BC Enterprise, so Chris has shown you there right at the core, we're delivering this common data environment capability to support the management of data, documents, and geometry, be that 2D or 3D or now geospatial information as well. And that's suitable for not only projects but for the enterprise. So quite a lot of our clients use us to manage all of their departmental information, their templates, procedures and policy information, setting up areas like communities of best practice and the like. And we've got a variety of different modular capabilities that support. Importantly, I think whenever you look at a system, you want to look at how is it really going to delight the user and provide reporting information. And again, through active dialogue and through clients keeping up to step with latest releases, we're constantly challenging ourselves, but listening to our clients in how we can achieve that. We hear workflow talked about a lot, and Chris illustrated in the presentation there the importance of moving away, for instance, from things like email or manual processes that are used for filing in network shares or in FTP or Dropbox style file share solutions to a more integrated and robust workflow that tie in your internal operations, potentially with your external supply chain, and give you a very clear view of where a process is at any point in time, and then retrospectively gives you a full audit of when did I issue those latest as-builts to the external supply chain, and on what date were they downloaded, etc. So that's all fully capable. This API application program interface, without getting too technical, working with a technology that will allow you to actually integrate with other best-of-breed applications is important as well, because you sit potentially in between maybe consultants, designers, or subcontract supply chain and the client, and you're a custodian of information at that point, and you need the ability to pass information potentially back and forth, not only between systems, but the client has, but maybe your own internal ones as well. And so that ability to flex and report is important as well. So the extending capabilities, we haven't gone into a lot of detail, but we're running a whole seminar series through until June, where we're looking to focus in on different challenges the industry is beset with, and we'll be revealing and talking about some of the capabilities and how we support those. In terms of implementation, clearly projects that are well defined look like that bottom line. It's easy to get from A to B, where we've got a very defined scope, we've got a clear mandate, we've got a well-prepared user community, we understand, and the broader project team, where our consultants are part of that project team, are are really clear with what we're trying to achieve. Because if we have an ill-defined scope and we don't have defined allocated resources in the client organisation that understand how it's going to enrich and improve their lives and add value to the way that they win and deliver project work, then it's going to be a different venture. But typically over a stage process, with our more standardised solution, BC Enterprise, we're talking about weeks for delivery. We mobilised the project on HS2 actually in under 6 days recently, and we're then going back to support that particular client now that they've got the environment configured and set up to help support their project systems administrators to be self-sufficient. So when future phases and projects come on board, they're very well versed in how to capture the client information requirement and set up the system accordingly to meet their project needs. And you meet people like Simon in our project team. So BC is a collective of industry experienced and skilled IT professionals, but importantly, everybody who is client facing has had a strong foot in the industry, in order that we can not only talk to you about best practice, but really support you on route as well. So before we move into questions, in terms of next steps, we'd really welcome your feedback on today's webinar. There's a short survey at the end of this. Please do get in touch if you'd like a deeper dive in any area. For those of you, and I know there are a few existing clients on the call, if there are things that you've seen that your organisation hasn't implemented, please do speak internally, find out who your account manager is, and get in contact, or do drop us a mail, and we'll do the signposting for you. If you like the look of the photographs you've seen of Chris and you want to meet him, do request an on-site workshop. We've got a number of consultants up and down the UK that can support that as well. But equally, do look out for our events page, and we've got quite a number of things. The next one on the 1st of March being a webinar that's specifically focused on what we're calling reality BIM, rather than this wonderful picture of everybody working in the cloud without the need for any other application. We're talking practically about what we're hearing and what we're implementing and what clients are demanding from us. So I'll pause there. I'll look across at my colleague Alison, see whether we've had any questions come through.
We've had a couple of questions. We've got a couple of minutes, so any of the questions that we don't answer on the call, we will get back to you with emails directly. But let's start. Does BC offer SME-specific licensing?
Quick answer is that we typically provide what's called an unlimited project license. So for our SMEs, that they find that quite attractive in terms of you have a fixed number of users, but those users can work on as many projects as one. So there's no penalties for winning large projects. You have a pool of licenses which you can manage, and you can also recycle those licenses. So if you, Alison, were working on a project, I can grant you a license, and then retire that license when the project comes to an end and assign it to someone else.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, in the last minute, how does BC differ from SharePoint?
As a question we get asked a lot, and I think that the reality is that SharePoint is a fantastic tool, but I think if we're thinking about it practically, you probably need a lot of investment and a small army of implementation consultants and developers to get it up and running, but also to maintain it going forwards. I think from BC's perspective, we've been designed from the bottom up to support engineering and collaboration and construction projects. And again, I think it's a simple method of picking the right tool for the right project. Okay,
we'll leave it there then. So thank you, Stuart and Chris, for your presentation today.